Molly here. Like every week, first we do a recap, then our review. There are bookmarks to easily navigate straight to the review, but I highly recommend listening to the recap because sometimes I can actually be funny. So, this week, it is Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 3, Episode 9, Terrarium. Also known as TOS Arena, also known as TOS Galileo 7, also known as TNG Darmok, also known as TNG Booby Trap, also known as TNG The Enemy, also known as TNG Who Watches the Watchers, also known as TNG Relics, also known as the film Enemy Mine, also known as Lost in Space, The Hungry Sea, also known as the film The Martian, also known as Die Hard. So, here we go. The episode opens with Erica Ortegas piloting a shuttle, solo, in order to check out gravity waves so odd even Spock can't figure it out. Ortegas tells Spock she's going to get him so much data it will be coming out of his ears. Realizing what she just said, she explains it's an expression, and says to Spock, "You know that, right?" Spock continues on, saying he's disappointed to not be going. They've stripped all non-essentials from the shuttle because every ounce counts. And Spock is too many ounces, and he responds that he maintains his weight with a variance of 1.8 kilograms, and says, "Is that not obvious?" After the scan is complete, which only takes really a matter of minutes, Ortegas is about to drop the subspace monitoring buoy. But just as she's about to drop the buoy, a wormhole opens up, and she gets sucked in. Going through the wormhole, Ortegas records a distress call, and says where she is and to bring snacks, then drops the buoy, and then crashes. The emergency rations were destroyed in the crash, but she manages to MacGyver together a water condenser using parts she pulls from the shuttle. Then for some reason, 2 days have gone by, and we're back on the Enterprise. Pike is dumb enough to ask where the wormhole goes, and Spock tells him it could be anywhere in the universe, or even another universe, which a starship captain should know. So they can't reach Ortegas, and Una points out that they're scheduled to rendezvous with the Constellation to deliver vaccines to colonists fighting the plague, a pandemic, on Epsilon Indy 3. Uhura wants to keep trying to find Erica, and Pike tells her no one's giving up yet, and they need to bring Erica home. On the other side of the wormhole, Ortegas ventures out of her shuttle to find food. Instead, she finds a Gorn, who is also stranded. The Gorn saves Ortegas' life from some creature that lives in a hole, and Ortegas and the Gorn eventually become friends after Ortegas realizes the Gorn has thrown food at her and isn't going to eat her. Ortegas treats the Gorn's wounded leg with some crystals or something, and they play games, and they're friends now. Anyway, Uhura and Spock run simulation after simulation trying to get through the wormhole, but the opening is now shrinking. They decide using the Enterprise to wedge it open is their only hope, and Uhura lies to Pike about the likelihood of the mission being successful. So they shove the Enterprise into the hole to keep it open. Ortegas determines she needs to send up a flare to get the Enterprise's attention, so she's going to ignite the atmosphere of the moon she's on, and a gas giant when their atmospheres collide, due to a flat elliptical orbit. The Gorn has a thruster pack with propellant in it, and Ortegas and the Gorn will hide under the Gorn's heat shield when the explosion occurs. Back on the Enterprise, Uhura comes clean about lying to Pike, but Pike tells her he knew and would have searched for Erica anyway. He says blurring the rules is new for Uhura, but it's not bad for the right reasons. They prepare to reverse course because the colonists need their pandemic shots. Uhura is crying at her station, and Spock notices an unusual atmospheric eruption from one of the unscanned moons. He puts it on screen, and the entire atmosphere of the moon is burning, and they know Ortegas is there. La'an beams down with security members, and when Ortegas and the Gorn come out from under the heat shield, La'an shoots and kills the Gorn. Erica's very upset and starts yelling to the lights she'd been seeing in the surrounding mountains, demanding to know who's behind it because she can feel them watching, and for them to come and face her. La'an tells the Enterprise to beam them up, and time freezes for everyone but Ortegas. Then Apophis shows up and says, "We are the Metrons." And they did this to Ortegas and the Gorn out of curiosity to see what would happen when two barbaric species were forced together in a survival situation. The violent reaction of La'an has given them much to consider, and they need more data to determine if the human and the Gorn will ever find peace. The Metron have determined that humans are not ready to meet them, and Ortegas won't remember the Metron. And someday they may need to reset, and they say your perception of the Gorn, so I don't know if they meant just Ortegas or all of humanity. But Ortegas will be allowed to remember what she experienced on the moon. Time resumes, and Ortegas, La'an, and the security team beam back to the ship. In her quarters, Ortegas tells Uhura the Gorn kept her alive and saved her, and was her friend. And La'an is her friend too. And Ortegas doesn't know what to do with that. Uhura tells Ortegas they both wanted to protect her, and to remember the Gorn. Uhura hugs Ortegas and leaves, and Ortegas looks over at a game piece on her shelf that she won from the Gorn while playing a Gorn game back on the moon. The end. I will say that I believe the actress who plays Ortegas, I don't remember her name right now, but I think she did as well as anybody could with the script that she was given. I wish it had been a better script that hadn't relied so heavily on taking ideas that were very obviously lifted from other episodes, many other Star Trek episodes, and also a few other places as well, films and Lost in Space, etc. Which brings me back around to, it really seems to me that the only way that using this many elements, very obviously drawn from other science fiction, it has to be done by AI. I can't imagine that a human writer would go through and use all of these elements from so many different places like this. It's just there are too many of them. I can see a human deciding to use like 2, maybe 3 elements from somewhere else. 5 at the most. But this is ridiculous. Which really comes back around to, I think that the overwhelming majority, if not all, of New Trek, Strange New Worlds in particular, that there's been a heavy AI influence to the writing. This is just ridiculous already.
We made a video a while back when Molly went over to ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to write some stories. And it glued together some stuff in several, I think you did 3 or 4 different iterations of stories.
It was a few, yeah.
And I agree with you. At this point, this is not asking the audience if this is plausible, which is what we were doing in that first video. We didn't know. We just said, is it plausible they could be using AI? At this point, I think plausibility is established, and we're now into, now you have to explain to me why we shouldn't assume they're using AI.
Oh, I think they are. There's no doubt in my mind that they are at this point.
They have to be, because as you pointed out, 1 or 2 little things, like, was it Starship Mine from TNG? That was the Die Hard episode. So that borrowed the premise of Die Hard, but the story itself was original elements around that concept. So they have had the idea of taking an idea, but then doing something different with it. But this is just jamming stuff together, like the Die Hard reference in this episode was Ortegas was walking along that moon or planet, because I was confused sometimes what the setting was. At first I thought that was a star in the background, that big blue thing. But I think what that was supposed to be was like a Jupiter planet, and that everybody else, they were on moons. There were all these moons they were trying to look for. So I think that's the setting, but if somebody can correct us, let us know. That's why sometimes during the description, Molly was calling it a planet or a moon, because it wasn't really clear to us what this was, but I think that was like a Jupiter-like planet that was that big blue thing in the background, and then I think Ortegas was on a moon circling.
I think so, because they said it was a gas giant that they were going to be passing through its atmosphere, and that they were on a moon. I'm fairly certain that's what was going on.
But the Die Hard reference was as Ortegas was walking along the moon, and she was talking to herself, and she was doing the, "Come out to the West Coast, you'll have a good time." We've all seen Die Hard, so you know what I'm talking about. Not only was she doing that language very closely, but the tone of her voice was so similar to what Bruce Willis was doing in that movie. Why? Why put that in there? Like, why? Everybody knows Die Hard. Why are you putting that in there?
I think they thought that the member berries would be good, that people would enjoy that, but I don't want that kind of reference in my Star Trek. It takes me right out of it, the suspension of disbelief that this is, centuries into our future, and why are they referencing Die Hard? It really took me out of it.
Well, and that's another thing, too, is I appreciate you're trying to give credit to the actress who plays Ortegas, and I don't know how good of an actress she is. So let's just assume she's doing what you said, making the best of a bad situation here with the script. But the Ortegas character is so annoying, the character as it's written in this show. The way she talks with, it's even barely appropriate form of English even now in 2025. And you mentioned to me when we were watching this that she reminded you of the Piccolo character from Sequest from the 90s. And one day we should do a review of Sequest, because I have both a lot of positives and a lot of negatives to say about Sequest. But the Piccolo character, which was played by one of the DeLuises, I didn't like that character because of the way he was portrayed as this street tough guy. And his accent and everything else was just so annoying. And that's what Ortegas reminds me of, is that sort of annoying character. I didn't like Piccolo in Sequest, and I don't like Ortegas in this. Why? I don't like that type of character, and it's even worse because Sequest was only supposed to be set like 20 years in the future. Well, I take that back. In season 2, there was this
ridiculous.
Yeah, there was a story, like, let's just say it was set somewhat in the near future. I'll just leave it at that. And this is supposed to be set further ahead in the future. By this, I mean Strange New Worlds. So her using all this, again, I'm being kind by calling it 2025 vocabulary. I found it odd that she was referring to ounces, and then Spock was referring to kilograms, and it's like, I'm assuming we're all metric by the time we reach Star Trek's era. I think TNG used metric, but I don't remember. Maybe TOS did use imperial still. I don't know. But, there was that flipping between, because she was trying to say every ounce matters using the phrase, the idiom, so to speak. And, I mean, that wasn't a horrible problem, but just all throughout her speech, she just uses these phrases that should not be around in the era that she's being portrayed in. She just shouldn't be talking like that, and it's so annoying. And then you go back to all this other stuff that they stole from, because at this point I'm calling it stolen. It was the AI that mined it. Who was the writer of this?
The writer was Alan B. McElroy.
Alan McElroy is a glorified editor, because I think he went into some AI system and this crap was cranked out for him.
Unless it's McElroy.
I don't care. Because this is ridiculous. The first thing everybody will probably think of when they see this is the movie Enemy Mine with Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. from, I think, 1985. Anybody who is a science fiction fan knows that movie. It's not like you're stealing from a small property if you're doing that. And you're telling me old Alan here didn't know that was from Enemy Mine? And somebody's going to say, but old man, and TNG did episodes like Darmok and did episodes like The Enemy. And it's like, right, but there was their own spin on that. It wasn't so blatantly taken from Enemy Mine. Because I don't even know what else to say. All I can think of is the people who are okay with this. they must, and I'm convinced this is true, they do not care about if something is stolen or redone. Not mixed up and taking a concept and trying to, do their own thing. No, I mean just stolen. Like, these people who like this show just must be okay with stealing. Because last week, pretty much everybody that I saw online was ripping apart last week's episode because it was so disrespectful and ridiculous to Star Trek. This one, I could see if somebody did not know any of the lore this was taken from. The episode itself was filmed kind of slickly. The cinematography was decently done. The visual effects on that moon were decently done. And I think, somebody correct me, but I think the Gorn was actually an animatronic, not a CGI character, because it actually didn't look too bad. So there's a lot of things that one could like about this episode, unless you're actually familiar. Every 2 to 3 minutes, they were stealing from something else. The Galileo 7, that's the first thing I thought of when they kept talking about, well, we're going to have to leave, and even though we can't find her, we're going to have to leave because we've got to get these vaccines somewhere. And then Ortegas like, we'll send up a flare. And I was telling Molly before that even happened, I said, do you want to bet she's going to find a way to send a flare? Because in Galileo 7, Spock ignited the shuttle fuel in order for the Enterprise to detect them in that orbit. And then they redid Arena here. Essentially, that's what this is they redid Arena. And what do you call him?
Oh, Apophis.
Apophis?
Yeah, from Stargate. Because that's the thing. It was getting toward the end, and I'm like, oh god, those lights that were over in the mountains, this better not be the Metron. And sure enough, it was. And the Metron shows up. And the Metron is a very androgynous creature whose voice goes between very deep and a little bit on the high side. So very androgynous, kind of modulating between masculine and feminine. I'm like, oh no, I can't believe they did that because...
Well, plus what the Metron was wearing in Arena, the original TOS episode, I think the Metron was wearing like a toga. But in this, you could argue it was a toga, but it kind of looked like a dress somebody would wear to the Grammys or something.
Yeah, it was hideous.
I just shrugged my shoulders at that, and then the messaging of, well, you will forget all of this, but one day we will educate you on...
Oh, someday we may need to reset your perception of the Gorn.
And that was referencing the Arena episode that's going to come up. And so, to me, this is a gimmick episode. In the comments, I had a bit of a discussion with somebody about what do I consider gimmicks. And gimmicks, like last week, blatantly a gimmick. But also, if you are making something so it's outside of the episode that you're dealing with, it's a prequel to something, or you're having a guest star come in, I consider that to be a gimmicky episode. It doesn't mean it can't be good, but I consider that to be a gimmicky episode. And because this was a prequel to Arena, or some could argue retelling Arena, basically saying, well, this is the original encounter that matters. Whatever you see in TOS, that was the lesser encounter. That's a gimmick to me.
Yeah, because what they did here was take an iconic episode, Arena. I mean, even people who aren't Star Trek fans, a lot of people recognize the episode with Kirk and the Gorn from TOS. They recognize Arena. I've encountered people that's like the only thing they know. Well, that and Spock. But that's all they know about the original series. And now they've gone and they've taken Arena and they've made theirs the first interaction with the Metron. And frankly, seriously, can't you do anything that's original? Why isn't anything yours? You have to steal everybody else's stuff. What is wrong with you?
Speaking of original, could you go back in your notes and read all the things you said in your introduction? Say them one by one, and then we'll quickly just touch on where we think that was borrowed, what was borrowed from that episode.
Oh, yeah, totally. Hold on.
Because at this point, we used to let some of this go, but now we're going to start calling it out a bit more, because these, as an art form, these writers that are putting this out there with their name on it, they should be ashamed of themselves, and they should be ostracized by the art community for doing this crap. So please, Molly.
Yes. So, the first one I likened this to was TOS Arena.
Which we already covered.
Yes. The next one was TOS Galileo 7.
Which we covered. The flare, as well as they're lost on, I think at that point it was a planet, not a moon, but we already covered that.
And next was TNG's Darmok.
Again, there was a scene that was funny when the Gorn threw a piece of meat or something at Ortegas, and it reminded me of Darmok when Picard was trying to start a fire, but he couldn't start a fire, and the alien threw a piece of wood that was lit on fire to help him light his campfire, and it reminded me of that episode.
Yep. And then next was TNG Booby Trap.
The booby trap, when they were running those simulations on how they could send that signal or whatever through the wormhole in this episode, and it reminded me of Booby Trap when Geordi was running those simulations to see how they could get out of that, I think it was a asteroid field or whatever.
The next was TNG The Enemy.
The Enemy was essentially Enemy Mine again, but done with a Romulan.
The next was TNG Who Watches the Watchers.
And Molly brought this one up because I didn't see it quite as clearly as she did, but the fact that the Metrons were observing what was going to happen here, like they were observing a lesser life form, because they were watching the Gorn for a while, I believe. I think that was the impression we were getting.
Yeah, because they were off in the mountains, and Ortegas had seen the lights up in the hills, which very much reminded me of Who Watches the Watchers, where they had let
Proto-Vulcan society.
Yes, actually see them accidentally up in the hills, but that's where they were observing from, and that's where the Metron were apparently observing from as well. And let's see, the next one was Relics, TNG Relics.
And that's the one with Scotty, and if we remember, Scotty and Geordi used their ship to keep that Dyson Sphere's open so the Enterprise could escape. Just like here when the Enterprise wedged itself in the wormhole to keep the wormhole open.
And then we talked about the film Enemy Mine already.
Yeah, that's self-explanatory.
Then we talked about, I mentioned Lost in Space, the original Lost in Space, The Hungry Sea.
Yeah, and that episode, that was I think like the third episode of the run. It was a black and white episode. And they were trying to figure out why this planet went through such harsh winter and heat cycles. And it turns out that's because they had a very flat elliptical orbit, and they even drew it on the ground in sand and what the orbit looked like, just like they did here.
The film The Martian.
Just the scrapping together of stuff. I'm sure people could give much longer explanations.
Yeah, Matt Damon on Mars trying to survive. Yeah. Oh, and then obviously we talked about Die Hard already, as far as what Ortegas said. So yeah, so that's, a brief list.
That's just what we caught ourselves. I'm sure if we went through and looked for any little thing, we could probably pull out lesser properties that were borrowed from.
Yeah, because that was just on first watch. I'm sure there are more that I could think of, because I recall things like, Ortegas had that game piece at the end, and I think Stargate had an episode with something like that, where I can't remember exactly. Like I said, I'd have to sit down and think about it, because my brain was just overwhelmed with all the different stolen aspects. But I know I've seen that somewhere before, too. This is just ridiculous already. I don't even know what to say anymore. I mean, if I was their instructor and they were handing this stuff in, say, a creative writing class, I would tell them to stop using the AI and actually try to come up with something original.
I don't think they can. I've been saying this all season. I think this is the best they can do. This is it. They use AI and they stitch together a script and say, done. And the problem I have with that, well, I have many problems with that, but we're science fiction watchers. I think most people listening to my voice are science fiction watchers. If you're Gen X or even millennial or boomer especially because they're older, you know this stuff that we're talking about. You know this stuff. So I can only assume that these people who are shoveling this crap, they're assuming that people watching this, well, two things. Either they don't know these properties, all the stuff that's being stolen from, or, and this one is a possibility, they just don't care. How does Lower Decks survive? Lower Decks gets the references right. That's as far as I can tell. The only thing that's different is they get the references and the iconography right. But all that show is just stolen after stolen material. And they say, oh, McMahon's a great fan. Every episode is just a rehash of member berries. So I don't know. Maybe people who like this, they go, yeah, I know it's stolen. I like that. I like Lower Decks too. And I just like watching stolen material mashed up together, and ta-da, I got myself a new episode. New in quotation marks. I don't know. As a Gen Xer myself, an older Gen Xer, I find this disgusting. Because I grew up most of my life watching original or semi-original material. And every week when I watched a new Star Trek episode, or I love lots of other things. I've talked about Babylon 5 before here. Going back to the 70s, you got Space 1999, you got the $6 Million Man. Yes, occasionally they'd have an episode that was like, okay, it's kind of a gimmicky telling of this or that. But most times they were original ideas, or at least original enough that it was a new adventure for me. And this, I don't know how anybody can watch this and think this is original. This episode is in any way original. Now, I get it. Cinematography, I gave credit a few minutes ago. It was shot, for Strange New Worlds, I'm going to give credit. It was shot slick. There was a certain feeling on that planet, even the music and the background noise they had on that planet. It was setting up an atmosphere, and I think I'm saying that was done well. I'm not saying that as an insult. It was done well. If there were different lines and a different story happening, the cinematography and the sound, that would have worked. And like I said, I think that was an animatronic Gorn. That was a nice effect. It was wasted in an episode like this, but it was nice. It was nice to see they could do something like that. Imagine if they didn't make it a Gorn and they just had Ortegas visiting this strange new world, visiting a new alien. That would be nice. Learning about a new alien.
Or here's a thought. Make it just a woman against nature and not include a Gorn. Don't include the Metron. And just have it more of a survival story.
Yeah, but then they would just steal from the Martian 100%. Because that's all they would do is just steal from the Martian more and more. They did steal now, but I mean, they would steal more and more.
Yeah, they would.
They're not capable of writing anything. The people who still think, I've heard this in one of our videos, in a comment, that Skydance, our assertion was it's not going to change anything. And somebody said, well, it will, but you have to wait till after all these 2 more seasons of Strange New Worlds and this Starfleet Academy movie. After all that's done, because they're contractually, they have to do that. But after that, then you'll see a big change. And it's like, you don't think Skydance could put a halt to all this now? They're willing to eat a bunch of money. You don't think they could just pay off Kurtzman to just go away? Cease and desist, all production, go away. But they're not doing that. We're getting more of this. Last week was embarrassing. This week is going to fool people because, like I said, the cinematography was pretty good. It's going to fool people to think this was a good episode. This was not a good episode. This is probably the most stolen material I've seen in Strange New Worlds, and they've stolen a lot of material. The first season Ursula Le Guin story that they stole was pretty bad, with no accreditation given. This is, I think, possibly on par with that. They just stole from far more properties. It was, hey, we just didn't steal from 1, we're going to steal from 5. Or I don't know how many you listed off there, but it was like 5, 7 properties. Thankfully, most of which were Star Trek. So I guess that puts it back into Lower Deck territory. If you steal from Star Trek, it's okay. It's homage. We're good.
Well, it's interesting because, sometimes, especially when you're dealing with things based on comic books, you have to give credit to the people who originally created some of the characters. If they had to do that with this, do you have any idea how long that writer's list would be?
Well, the credits would go on for 15, 20 minutes.
Kind of like the producers.
Yeah. I think they have more producers than actors, but I don't want to get it. I know Discovery did.
Yeah. Yeah, that is just so bad.
Because I wish I could spend some time talking about the positive production things they did do here. The planet effect, the Gorn, the sound, there was a lot of things they did do right here, but there was a lot more they did wrong.
Yeah. On top of all that, Uhura was infantilized. Spock was made fun of again. Pike looks like some sort of babysitter.
Well, Pike they doubled down on when Uhura when she fudged the numbers, and Pike later said, "Oh, I knew you fudged those numbers, but for the right reason, it's okay." And I'm thinking, dude, you're okay with anything. You just let M'Benga do whatever he wants. So, that was killing somebody. You think fudging a number that Uhura did is going to matter compared to letting a murderer just run around?
Yeah. Like I said, I wish I could get to see the actress who plays Ortegas given a proper script so I could actually see what she can do. And I say that about all of the actors on this show. Like Anson Mount, I know he can do better than this because I've seen him in other things.
We've seen Christina Chong slip in, because I've never seen her before this series, but she slips in good performances in this crappy scripts. I've said this a few episodes ago. I think once she leaves this show, she's going to have a big career, because I think that's a talent there that they found, and she's going to move on to do much better things.
There was one really, really good thing about this episode, though, that I really, really liked. Nurse Chapel wasn't in it.
Yeah, good point. Nor was Pelia. Pelia wasn't in it either.
Yeah.
And too bad Ortegas was in it, but...
And again, that comes right back to the writing. I have no idea what this actress could actually do if she was given a proper script to read. It's a shame.
And the larger question I have here, because I mentioned this to Molly, why was it Ortegas that was the person in this episode? Because the Metron, I don't even want to call that person the Metron, the Stargate...
Call him Apophis.
The Goa'uld was mentioning that she went beyond her pain and her trauma or something like that. And as far as I know, she was only introduced to that this season. But La'an, I believe she was a little girl when those Gorn were there. Shouldn't this have been a La'an episode? Wouldn't the Goa'uld saying that to Discount Drummer, wouldn't that have mattered more than Ortegas? From this point on, I'm calling Ortegas Piccolo. That's what I'm going to do. We've got Discount Drummer, we got Ace Ventura, now we got Piccolo. Because I'm tired of what they're doing on this show. I am just totally sick of what they're doing.
I think the reason that they didn't use La'an was because she would have just killed the Gorn.
Well, that's what she did when she got on the planet. She couldn't wait to blow a hole in that Gorn. And then I was thinking, well, maybe there would be a discussion there between Ortegas and Discount Drummer back when they got on the ship. Nope. It was Uhura and Ortegas. Apparently, Discount Drummer's trauma doesn't matter. She's got more reason to have real trauma than Ortegas did, but we don't talk about that.
I think it would have been a far more interesting episode if they would have explored what to do with that Gorn.
Like maybe taking them back.
If Ortegas had come out first and said, look, I need you to just remain calm, but I've got somebody else in there. They saved my life. So do not shoot them. It's a Gorn. And the Gorn comes out, and they're like, okay, well, now what do we do? From what it seemed, the Gorn wouldn't want her back, because apparently she was weak or something like that, because she was determined to die there on that moon, because the Gorn were never going to come. They killed the weak, apparently. So it would have been interesting to see, once they healed her, or she healed, what were they going to do with her? That would have been an interesting thing to explore. Why didn't they explore that?
They could have taken the Gorn back to the Enterprise, and then we've got like an asylum situation here. What do we do with this Gorn?
Yeah.
Yeah, that could have been a very interesting storyline that you could have had a few episodes on, dealing with the consequences of what do we do. Yeah,
not just for the Federation, but for that Gorn, who never had a name. But what would be what would be her life like? What would it be like? separated from her people, unable to go home. Or would she be able to go home once she healed? I don't know.
Did she want to go home?
That's a good question.
Because at least in the TNG episode, The Enemy, that Romulan did want to go home.
Yeah.
Whereas I didn't think this Gorn wanted to go home.
No, I think she would have been ostracized or killed.
But wouldn't it have been nice? I realized they couldn't have talked about that because when Ortegas played MacGyver and made a universal translator out of, I don't know, hair and dirt. So all it could do is basically, it was funny because when she made this translator that could do yes or no, essentially.
Agree or disagree.
Which I was laughing because I was like, remember when Pike ends up in that chair and all he can do is say yes or no with the beeps.
Beep, beep.
So this was a setup where the Gorn could agree or disagree, basically say yes or no. So there was no way to communicate in that direction at all.
But the Gorn could understand everything that Ortegas said. So it was one way, the conversation, really.
Which could have been explored. Hey, this creature actually has a lot of intelligence, and even showed a board game that she played.
Well, that Gorn beat Ortegas, I think, 4 times in a row at chess, right after Ortegas taught her how to play. So yeah, why couldn't they have explored that instead? Instead of what they did do, bringing the Metron in there. Really? Really?
Because that ending was jammed in there. That Metron thing at the end, that was jammed in there. It didn't even feel like it should have been in this episode. It was just jammed in there.
Well, that's what happens when you let AI determine what's going to be in there. This was garbage.
Because the episode had a certain pacing, and then right when the Metron showed up, the pacing completely changed, and it felt like this didn't belong in this episode. And I wish it wouldn't have, because I was willing to give some positives to this episode, even with all the stolen material. But then once the Goa'uld showed up, I just shrugged my shoulders and like, Molly, I'm not going to be too nice to this episode. I was thinking about, even with the stolen material, they were trying to do some good things here, some cinematography, something. Nah, we're done. We're not even going to try to be nice here. Once they did that, I'm done.
Well, I mean, we were playing a little game while we were watching it. What are they going to steal from next? And you very accurately predicted a lot of what they were doing.
Yeah, the Galileo 7 stuff. I remember I said, Molly,
yeah,
don't have this, because this was not like right toward the end. This was like in the middle of the episode. I said, Molly, I hope she doesn't set off a flare to get the Enterprise's attention so that they can find her on this moon, because that's more Galileo 7 ripping off. And then I was absolutely correct.
Yeah, I was sitting there, don't be a flare, don't be a flare, don't be a flare. And then she said, oh, we're going to send a flare up. Oh, no. Why can't you stop stealing?
And then, like, the picking up the little lines here or there. They were going to rendezvous with the Constellation and Captain Decker, and that was a Easter egg going back to the Doomsday Machine from TOS.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, that one I would probably just kind of roll my eyes and go, okay, but on top of all this other stuff that they did, whatever. I watch this. If you like Lower Decks and you like mashups, just watch this. You'll enjoy it. It's great. It's great. They mashed it up real good.
Yeah, but if you're sick of them stealing and it's just going to irritate the hell out of you to see them steal over and over and over again, then don't watch this. I mean, it's a shame because, again, there were parts of this that I thought they did well. But then there were parts of it that were so bad, it makes it unwatchable, in my opinion.
Yeah, poison pills of sorts.
Yeah, poison pills.
Because we could talk, I mean, I wish this would have went down differently, because we actually could have taken this review in a different direction and talked about some of the interesting things they did do on the planet. Because they did. This was nowhere near last week's ridiculous episode. There was actually something here that I could have given some praise for. But because of all the thievery that they did, nah, I'm not giving them any credit for that. Next.
Yeah, because, I mean, I knew that they were going to kill that Gorn somehow before the end of the episode. I just knew. It was getting to the point where it's getting toward the end, and I'm like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe this was probably one of their better episodes. And then I'm like, but please don't bring the Metron in. Just please don't do it. Please don't. And then they did. Well, and I'm just like, then this, I hate this episode now.
Because what that was doing was reinforcing, because even with all the thievery, we were willing to say, look, I know you stole a bunch of stuff, but maybe you can end this on your own terms.
Yeah.
Make this your own thing, a Strange New Worlds episode. Do your own thing at the very ending here. And they could not help but bringing in something from TOS at the very end. The arena episode that had to do with the Gorn. And at that point, it was like, no, we're not giving them any credit because that punch in the face they did at the end with the Goa'uld bringing the Metron back.
Yeah.
Nope. Done.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, this wasn't good. So I did go to see Jaws last week. And I got the popcorn bucket. And I got the drink barrel. And I had a great time. Everybody else in the theater seemed to have a great time. We clapped at the end. It was so nice to be able to watch something that didn't suck for a change.
Full theater.
Yeah. So I mean, it was great. It was great. And frankly, I'm looking forward to when they have more films like that in the movies, in the theater. Because
I think Back to the Future is supposed to be.
Yes, Back to the Future is going to be in the theater in October. So I already told my mom that I would take her because she wants to go see that. So I'm going to take my mom to see Back to the Future in the theater come the end of October. So, yep. So that's the next one coming up. I think The Sound of Music might be coming to the theater in this month or next month. I don't remember now. I'll have to look. But that's what I keep doing. I keep looking to see what older films are going to be re-released, at least on a temporary basis. And I'm going to see those. Because they keep telling us, well, vote with your money. Well, that's what I'm doing. You bring back films I actually want to see, I will go to that theater. But you keep showing me crap I don't, I'm not going to be going. Because, like, the previews before Jaws, one of them was for that new Tron movie, which honestly looked like garbage to me. And the rest were for things like Back to the Future. And I'm like, dude, you got nothing? They got nothing.
No, I'm like, they're going to make this Avengers movie, and I'm not going to go see that.
No. So the next big one, I believe, is The Sound of Music, but then in October is Back to the Future. So if you like Back to the Future, you bet your bippy I'm going to be getting my tickets. Actually, I probably should look and see if they're on sale already so I can pick out the seats I want. And I'm going to go see that.
If they brought back the original Tron, I would go see that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that would be so great.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wasn't old enough to go to the movies back when that came out.
I saw it in the theater.
I know you did.
But that's the last time I saw it at a theater, obviously. So I watched it on DVD/Blu-ray the past few years. But it would be nice to see on the big screen again. That would remind me of me being a much younger person. Oh, and I'll admit, I hadn't been born yet when Jaws originally was in the theater. So this was a real coup for me because, that's something I'd never gotten the chance to see in the theater before. And now I finally did. And it was fantastic. Honestly, I wish they would show that in the theater every year. I don't know if as many people would go, but I know I would. Yeah, I didn't see Jaws in the theater, but I did see the Christopher Reeve 78 film in the theater, and I would like that re-released because I think we showed on our channel, our video, that we did not care for this current iteration, but being able to see the original 78 Christopher Reeve Superman in the theater again, because I haven't seen that since the 70s in the theater, that would be fantastic. Well, maybe in 3 years for its 50th, maybe they will re-release it. That would be nice. I really hope they do. Because a lot of these films, like I remember seeing the 77 Star Wars in the theater, and you can't match being in a theater with a bunch of people watching this stuff versus watching it on your TV. Yeah, less annoying people when you're hopefully in your own living room. But there's something missing there when these movies back in the day were meant to be spectacles to be enjoyed by the masses. Anyway, Jaws was fantastic. Keep an eye out for tickets for Back to the Future. And, try to find some joy where you can. And right now, for me, it's going to the theater and seeing movies like Jaws and Back to the Future.
So, anyways, don't watch this. Don't watch Strange New Worlds. This was just more mashup garbage that I think AI actually wrote.
Well, I don't think there's a think. I think at this point it's proven AI wrote this.
Well, I don't have proof, but I am fairly certain that they did.
I think there's enough circumstantial evidence here where it could be, if this was a prosecution of sorts in a court, I think enough circumstantial evidence is here to win the conviction.
All right, well, then I guess you guys are the jury. What do you think? Do you think this was written by AI, or do you think this is humans that are doing all this stealing? Leave your comments in the area below, and until next week.
Take care.